hitting record. And I'm going to share my screen. And today, I thought if we think we can manage it, if we can get through the remainder of chapter 1 of the letter to the Philippians, which is verses 12 through 20 or 12 through 30 is what's left. And I think we can probably break that in half to read, because that is a lot of verses to reflect on in one big chunk. So go, what, I think 12 to 20, and then does that work with your with the paraphrase? I know sometimes they group verses.
12 to 20?
Yeah.
Let's see. My first group is 12 to, and the NIV it's group 12 to 26, and then it splits again at 27 to 30.
Would we like to do 12 to 26 and then
it's up to you guys. That's just what the NIV does.
That's what I've got here.
Okay. There is a paragraph break at 20.
Okay.
Oh, actually, no, hold on. At 18.
Okay. That's the one I always am careful with is the paraphrase. Sometimes they combine verses. Yeah.
Yep, but it's the same NIV and Message.
Okay.
So there's 12 to 18 is a paragraph break. And then if you want to go 12 to 26, then there's a little heading break.
Excuse me. Any opinions on bigger first chunk or bigger second chunk?
Mine's separated from 12 to 20.
Okay, let's do that.
And then 26, then 20 through 26, and then 27 on.
Okay. So we'll read 12 to 20 and then 21 through 30.
Yeah.
Great. Would someone like to read this first portion?
I will.
Thanks.
Okay, go.
I'm reading to 20.
Yep.
But I want you to know, brethren, yes, that's perfect. Thank you. But I want you to know, brethren, that the things which happened to me have actually turned out for the furtherance of the gospel, so that it has become evident to the whole palace guard and to all the rest that my chains are in Christ, and most of the brethren in the Lord, having become confident by my chains, are much more bold to speak the word without fear. Some indeed preach Christ even from envy and strife, and some also from goodwill. The former preach Christ from selfish ambition, not sincerity, supposing to add affliction to my chains. But the latter out of love, knowing that I am appointed for the defense of the gospel. What then? Only that in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is preached, and in this I rejoice. Yes, and will rejoice. For I know that this will turn out for my deliverance through your prayer and the supply of the Spirit of Jesus Christ. You know, mine has a comma there. So, according to my earnest expectation and hope that, because mine's not ending in a period.
Oh, weird.
That in nothing I shall be ashamed, but with all boldness as always. So now also Christ will be magnified in my body, whether by life or by death. And that's where I have a period.
Okay. Yep.
That's about.
Yep. That seems about right.
And because you guys want to know this, I did not read that ahead of time, and I always pre-read if I'm going to read out loud.
That was a great job.
Real good. That was very good. So I will share my thought as I was reading this, doing some of my preparation. Is Paul just comes across almost annoyingly optimistic.
Yeah.
I think he was just happy to lay down for a minute. I think he's tired and he's like, if I'm in here,
Who just wanted to.
I don't feel guilty about not doing other stuff. That's my thought, but yeah. But I guess, what's going on in his own head doesn't have to be what he wrote down too.
Mhm.
Maybe he's trying to be just super positive to cheer up whoever's reading the letter.
That is also true. So the one note that I had is in verse 19. In my translation, it's talks about deliverance. There is questions among scholars that no one is really sure if Paul means deliverance from his current situation in prison, or if he's talking about deliverance in a broad sense, salvation. And he could be saying both at the same time. But that's just a thing that I would call attention to in that passage.
Yeah.
I gotta put on my David hat. He's not here for us.
I'd pull out my NRSV and see what it says.
And it's since I'm being David, it's soteria is the word deliverance in Greek, which I did more translations than I normally do, and God must have just been warning me that we wouldn't have David today.
Yeah.
This made me think of politics, but the former preach Christ from selfish ambition, not sincerely. Because what's his name? I can't think. Quoted Pulp Fiction for the Bible. Have you ever seen Pulp Fiction?
Was that Hegseth who did that?
Yeah, Hegseth. There's a scene, you know what Pulp Fiction is, though.
Yeah,
there's a scene in Pulp Fiction where the actor goes off, which supposedly it's not. So then Hegseth quoted it as if it was the Bible.
Oh, okay.
Not from a movie that wasn't the Bible. Like, I read the Bible, I'm quoting not that it's a bad movie, but it's a dirty movie, very violent, very, included a basically intimidating scene in it. But that's where selfish ambition, preach Christ from selfish ambition, trying to move higher and using God as a means to do so.
So you're actually absolutely right. Politics is very much involved in the writing of this letter. There is, if any of you feel like reading a very academic book on the letter to the Philippians, I do have one where it talks about how, especially in the city of Philippi, voluntary associations, clubs were a very important thing. And when Christianity started, people thought to themselves, this is just another voluntary association, because these were clubs that had laxer rules on women associating with men, poor associating with rich, a lot of the things that we see in Christianity. So people were like, oh, we know what this looks like. But the difference was these voluntary associations usually had cultic practices. They devoted themselves to a Roman god and also to the emperor. So the fact that the Christians would not devote themselves to the emperor put them out of step with the others. And there is a belief among some scholars that the people that they're complaining about, the opposition in this letter, are other Christians who were part of another voluntary association, and that did devote themselves to the emperor. And so there is this these political groups that are fighting, that we agree on some things, but we're also at odds here. So there is you're right, exactly. There is that political background as part of this letter.
It made me think of, I was telling you, I thought, cannot take the name of the Lord by God in vain, as like, don't say God damn it or something. But she says, no, this is actually taking the Lord's name in vain, to justify what they're saying.
Mhm. Yeah, and Paul is very permissive of people doing that in this. It's funny, he kind of says like, as long as you're talking about God, I guess.
Yeah. It is right
Yeah.
there.
My footnote says that these preachers are not to be viewed not viewed by Paul as heretical. Their message is true, even though their motives are not pure, and the gospel has its objectivity and validity apart from those who proclaim it,
Mhm.
because the message is more than the medium. So he's saying even if your motives are bad, like you're still saying true things.
Right.
So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. And
So
he does say
that's
all-
what that was we're looking at here. It says he's talking about the selfish ambitions, and then in verse 18 says, but that doesn't matter whether their motives are false or genuine. The message about Christ is being preached either way, so I rejoice.
Mhm.
And I can continue to rejoice because it is being preached. And I was just thinking about that when we were reading something with for EFM this week, and one of the things, I think it was Jonah, where God was preaching and Jonah was mad because he didn't think he should be preaching to these people who are so sinful and everything in Nineveh. And I was just thinking, how can you be like that? How can you be so angry, and not preach and not want to give the good news to people that really need it? But you're mad at them, but you're mad at God for taking it to them. It didn't make sense to me. But then a lot of the Bible doesn't make sense.
Has it come up in EFM? There's a theory that the story of Jonah is satire.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, there were some interesting things today. I haven't read. That's what I have to read this afternoon, is the part out of the textbook on that. But I listen to it. I listen to all the scriptures when I'm doing other stuff, and so sometimes I don't get it all. And but I just have a couple more chapters. We had to combine some weeks, but anyway. But I just thought that was interesting. That no matter whether your motives are good or bad,
Mhm.
it's being it is still being preached. The gospel is still being preached. And I was thinking about that. Nowadays we have that going on too. I mean, we have the prosperity gospel, we have mainline, we have evangelical, but they're all preaching the gospel. So people are hearing about Jesus. So and maybe some of the ideas are a little skewed on major things, but the two things that really need to be preached are Jesus Christ, and our purpose on this earth is to love God and to love our neighbor.
I think my best example of that is, has everybody seen the "He Gets Us" ads?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're ads about how, like, you're going through a regular situation, your life is hard for some reason, but Jesus gets us.
Yeah, those
And
are
they're
cool
really
ads.
they're really
Those are
good
pretty cool
ads.
Yeah.
If you dig into who is behind the ads, they have some beliefs that differ from mine. Their theology, I don't agree with all of it, but everything that is in the ads, I can get behind.
Mhm.
And so I think that's kind of where I can kind of feel what Paul is saying here, where it's okay, this message that I want people to have, it's getting out there in a really compelling way. We might not agree on everything. Your motives might be different than my motives, but on this, at least, we're aligned to share the gospel in the way that we both believe.
Yeah. Not to be contrarian, but I think there's limits there, because when I lived in Kansas, where I got I went to school, University of Kansas. There was a Westboro Baptist Church in Fred Phelps,
Mm-hmm.
and they were very active. So you'd go to see any theater production, and there was a group of little kids. We were going to go see Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, something like that, and it was God hates the F slur.
Yeah.
And all the signs up, and they were church, and that probably set me back in my faith, like probably a good 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't want to have anything to do with people who would like use that kind of profanity around children, and they would go to service members' funerals. Do you remember
Yeah,
that?
I
If they
do.
died and say that, and like there was a Marine, and they like ran into his funeral, and I was like, if this is what Christians are about, I don't want to have anything to do with it.
Right.
And so I think like he gets his ads, there's a lot that's aligned, but that's where I feel like it's using God's name in vain, right? Because they didn't really have anything to do with the gospel at all. They're just preaching hate, but they're calling themselves a church using God. And I think that sets people back pretty.
Oh, I agree.
Gosh, yeah.
It was a very weird time to be there. And
Mhm.
yeah, and there's a lot of hate.
Different.
Yeah, there's just can be a lot of hate, and people try to put God's name on it. And
I would argue that they're not preaching the gospel.
I mean, they thought
Yeah.
they were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They thought
So
they were, yeah. A lot of churches nowadays do push, they're not inclusive. So when they're not inclusive, they're actually pushing hate towards those who are not being inclusive, included. And it makes it, and that was one of the reasons why Dave and I had to leave the church we were at, is because we just didn't feel that they were being inclusive at all.
Right.
So, but Westboro Baptist Church is known big time for
Yeah.
for its demonstrations.
yeah, they
Yeah,
were.
so-
You couldn't get a sandwich without seeing them in Lawrence.
Mm.
I mean, they were everywhere all the time. So
And you know
kinda
what? They were all. It was pretty much one family.
yeah,
It wasn't like a whole bunch of people were joining their church. It was like all one family. I don't know if it's cousins and uncles and sisters and brothers or whatever, but they were all one family, and that was yeah.
yeah. So I don't know if Paul met Fred Phelps, they'd have a good conversation, maybe.
We can always hope.
I'd pay to see that. That'd be a good screen. That'd be a good
One act.
react play,
Yeah.
one act play. All right.
Was there anything else we wanted to talk about for this section, or are we good to move on?
Just what we talked about, but more in line with you.
Yeah.
I went to Catholic school, but we watched, I'm sure it wasn't daily, but just in my head it was daily, Davy and Goliath.
Oh,
Was it the
100%.
claymation? That's a Lutheran church.
Yeah.
Who made that show. So Catholics are obviously the best. They're the right. They're the, which is everything we learn. But yet we're watching because the message of Davy and Goliath didn't conflict Lutheran
Yeah.
versus Catholic.
Yeah.
So I think, and I agree with what you were saying too, but that's just an example of we're still, I think there's a lot of the Bible, how we interpret it, how best fits our personal narrative. But still between some, not all, there's that core part. And like I said, I love Davy and Goliath. I mean, if you're bringing out that whole cart with the big TV,
Yeah.
then you know it's going to be a good day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's also a little bit of a do as I say, not as I do. That feels like it's coming out of this.
Yeah.
Like the pastor with the Rolls Royce saying, "Give your money to the poor."
Yeah.
No.
Well, people are people.
Mhm.
Everyone's
Yeah.
flawed. Everyone has conflicting motives. Everyone gets greedy. Everyone
Mhm.
gets jealous. Everyone's a hypocrite. Almost everybody.
Yeah, yeah.
So
We're all just
I
doing the
keep
best we
telling my
can.
wife I'm flawless and she's not buying this. I do. I say that all the time. She just shakes her head.
we have aspirations. You're like speaking into existence.
All right. Me through 30. I take a turn. I always make everybody else read. I can do one. Um, and I'll read out of my new revised standard version instead of the one that's on the screen. Just a spot. Okay. It is my eager expectation and hope that I will not be put to shame in any way, but that by my speaking with all boldness, Christ will be exalted now as always in my body, whether by life or by death. For to me living is Christ and dying is gain. If I am to live in the flesh, that means fruitful labor for me, and I do not know which I prefer. I am hard pressed between the two. My desire is to depart and be with Christ, for that is far better, but to remain in the flesh is more necessary for you. Since I am convinced of this, I know that I will remain and continue with all of you for your progress and joy in faith, so that I may share abundantly in your boasting in Christ Jesus when I come to you again. Only live your life in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or am absent and hear about you, I will know that you are standing firm in one spirit, striving side by side with one mind for the faith of the gospel, and are in no way intimidated by your opponents. For them, this is evidence of their destruction, but of your salvation. And that is God's doing, for he has graciously granted you the privilege not only of believing in Christ, but of suffering for him as well, since you are having the same struggle that you saw I had, and now hear that I still have.
How can I say this? You should be in Christ all the time. Sometimes when you have struggles, that's when you think about it all the more. I mean, you should think about it in good times too, but that kind of brings you closer. At least for me, it did, and it stayed. So struggles sometimes are a good thing that God gives you.
I read man's extremity, like when you're in terrible situations, is God's opportunity. I think about that sometimes. It's like when you're up against it,
That
like,
makes
okay,
sense.
God's like, okay, now will you listen?
Yeah, exactly.
Have your attention yet?
Okay, but we could just stub our toe. Come on, people. They have to be so dramatic, Ed.
I know. And it is always okay to yell at God, give me a break.
Yeah. But it's the Fiddler on the Roof. When he talks to Tabby, a song about, do I have to be that blessed or however?
I just remember my mother-in-law when she was in her 90s and all her friends are dying around her, everybody's dying, and she just says, actually that was David's grandmother said that. She says, I just don't want to be here anymore. I just don't have any more friends. I'm not here. I just, and that's hard when you lose everybody except for, one person, or even you don't have anybody. It's, some people question, like, why did I live so long? I don't. So
we do not have to go into this based on people's comfort with it, but I will mention that this is often a passage that's used as an argument against suicide or choosing to end your own life for any reason. Doesn't have to be a discussion, but I just thought I would point out, if anyone ever brings that up, this is the passage that's normally pointed to.
As far as suicide, though, I don't know how a person can do that and be in their right mind. I think you're sick, and it's not something you would choose to do if you were healthy. So
yeah, unless it's like there's chronic pain situation.
Death with dignity.
Well,
There's, mental illness is so painful sometimes that if you're gonna, for me, like, I can be persuaded lots of different ways on it, but it's like if someone has like very severe pain, you're like, oh, I get that, right? And then you're like, okay, but if mental illness is also severe pain, okay, maybe I get, right? Like it starts to be really ambiguous to me. I've lost people to suicide, and you get very angry for a while because you're like, you didn't need to do that. Like, I'm sad and you could have prevented that. Right. And then I tried to come to terms with this idea that like, you're not in their head and whatever that pain was is something they couldn't get through. So try to just be, understanding, gentle is a good word there.
Yeah.
I find it hard to believe that if you commit suicide, at least what I was taught, that you're going right to hell.
Right.
And it can't be.
Mike and I were at a funeral where that's what was preached.
Yeah.
What a shame that Chrissy did this. She's going to hell and then we'll never see her.
I'm sorry that happened.
That's
certainly not something we believe here, and I will say that explicitly.
And whether it's believed or that was not the time or the place.
Yeah, why would you do that?
Yeah, that's
It was like
It used to be that you couldn't be buried in consecrated ground either. Like you couldn't be buried in a church yard. You had to be buried in a pauper's kind of grave.
Yeah.
That's just sad.
It is very
It
sad.
is.
Wasn't it Father Ruby did stuff in the Catholic Church about suicide?
He did, yeah.
Father Ruby's a Catholic priest. And
Really cool guy.
he married you and Mom, didn't he?
Yeah.
But he started doing stuff positive, but trying to get them to be buried in the Catholic Church, people who have attempted suicide, support groups for them, support groups for families of individuals, instead of saying, it's bad, you're going to hell, goodbye, close the door. Just really, this is a place where the church has a place.
That's great.
Not to turn away from it.
Yeah. I bet that was meaningful to a lot of people.
Yeah, because it's what people have, I think, mistakenly turned this passage into is that you, even if you do not want to live anymore, you should live because even if it's hard, you're doing it for other people, and that should be enough. And I think we all know that our existence as humans is much more complicated than that.
Exactly right.
And it's not weakness or an easy way out.
Well, and I think for Paul, I'm trying to put myself in it was very clear he was impacting a lot of people in a positive way just by being there. And if all of us had that support and reassurance that everything you say we all want to hear, we all wait for your letter, we all want to know what you do, it's so important to us you're alive. If everyone felt that way, then this makes more sense. But most of us live lives where sometimes you're not sure anyone notices whether you're around or not. So that's hard.
And I think it's meant to be a message of hope, not a bludgeon.
Yeah. Do you guys remember Bernie? You wouldn't have. Leslie, do you remember Bernie? Oh, she's right.
Well, we didn't, David and I never met him because he was already in a nursing home or wherever he was when we started coming and everything, but we remember who he was.
Yeah, he lived to be about I think 101 or 102. Wow. And we used to have birthday parades around the nursing home for him during COVID. And he'd been a parishioner here for a long, super cool guy. He was like a fighter pilot in World War II. He's one of the kind of guys that if he comes up and all the little kids, even though they don't know him, would come and hang out. He just had that kind of aura, just a wonderful person. But he got very, very, very old. We'd seen all his wives die, all his friends die. He was losing his sight. Barb was the one who went to visit him at Barb Plants all the time. And he was like, I don't see why I'm here. There is no point as far as I can tell. And he's like, but God must have a different idea than I do. So I'll just keep showing up every day and doing what I can.
Yeah.
And trying to be positive. And he's like, but this really makes no sense to me at all. And I just remember hearing that and thinking wow.
Yeah.
He's like, God must know something I don't know, but he's not telling me what it is.
He's not the only one. I've heard other people say very similar things.
So,
yeah.
Very reflective, though, to think God has me still here. Versus Mike's Aunt Carmen, well, even his grandma when she got older. Sure, I just want to die. I hurt. And I'm like, Aunt Carmen, what about your grandkids? I've got one. That's enough to see. I was like, what? But she's just old, Italian, and sore,
Yeah.
but not reflective of God still has me here. You know what I mean? Like, no, I mean, we clearly all go to Catholic church still regularly every Sunday. Nobody would admit to anything, but
Yeah.
I like that he's reflective of God has some reason. I don't know what it is,
Yeah.
Mhm.
but there's some reason.
There's a little, I think it was a TikTok. I don't know if you saw it. It was this woman and she picked out the urn she wanted her ashes in. And she was showing her family, and her grandson who's doing the video was like, this is like, do you want this? She's like, I yearn for the urn.
That is funny.
You're ready to go. Look at how beautiful it is. I want to be in there. Done. Yearn for the urn.
Oh my gosh.
That is hilarious.
Um, I'm gonna steer us for the last three verses of this because we do get like a hard shift in
Yeah.
topics at the end there. And we go from Paul being reflective to giving advice to the community, and this is where we get back to that political nature of it. Is the word that is either conduct yourself in some translations or live your life. That part of in verse 27. It's the Greek word. Forgive my pronunciation. Politeuthese. Don't have the pronunciation on that, but it is
the only one who would know if you did it wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's related to citizenship. That it's how you live as a good citizen, and so that gets into what I was saying before about it. The way that you are behaving, and Paul will say later, we'll get into the third chapter, that we are citizens of heaven. So that's where we should devote ourselves to, not devote ourselves to Rome or to our country. There's makes me think of the weird umbrella picture of God is the top umbrella, and then the country, and then the Father, and then yes. Umbrellas don't work that way. But yeah, I just wanted to point that out because the citizenship nature of it is not obvious in the translations that any of us have.
And it would probably be like if you were a Roman citizen, or these were Roman citizens, so that idea of citizenship and your conduct and your rights and what's expected of you as a citizen of Rome was probably something that they had heard before. So it would have been a concept they were familiar with.
Absolutely. Last week we talked about how this was a place where a lot of retired Roman soldiers went to live. And this is a Roman colony. Very, very citizenship was very important in this city. So I think these messages would have hit home, especially.
God, country, core.
Yes.
Something I've heard more than once. Yeah.
I was gonna say he was a Marine, right?
Always is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Never was. But yeah, that makes sense. The message paraphrases it, and it sounds this idea: your conduct must be the same. Something stand united, contending for people's trust in the message, not flinching or dodging in the slightest before opposition. Your courage and unity will show them what they're up against. Defeat for them, victory for you, and both because of God. So this idea, that sounds very soldier-esque. Like if you stand up and you're not afraid, they're gonna be like intimidated. So
yeah, and there's debates whether the opposition is other Christians or whether it's outside groups.
What could the Philippines learn from?
Which is if it's other Christians, that's very similar to what we were talking about before, where it's we say that we believe the same thing, but we're sometimes preaching wildly different messages.
You know, parts of the Bible have come up in adult adult forum. With this, not in any way terrified of your adversaries. Probably should have my glasses on, which is to them prove, well, whatever, it goes on. It's been brought up, talked about, particularly after one school shooting, when they were asking about people believing in God and then shooting them if they were. And it was a discussion amongst the people about just denying him and saving yourself, which
is that a real thing that happened? I thought that was just a thing that youth groups, conservative youth groups did.
Based on the person who brought it up, would be my guess that it was happening in her church. It's not secret.
Yeah, I'm not sure it actually. I don't know how much of it's factual.
Yeah,
I don't know.
And how much of it's a hypothetical situation.
And honestly, half of this stuff doesn't even make the news. Like, people don't even notice when stuff happens anymore.
Very hard to know what's real, actually.
Yeah. But I was like, no, there's time denying him's good. Hey, when you're in high school, save yourself. And then go to church on Sunday and preach to somebody else. You're not converting somebody. It's like having an argument with somebody on like, I'm not going to sit here and argue with you that God's bad. You became a priest. You believe what you believe. No matter how much I argue with you, I'm not changing your mind. I'm going to walk away. Well, and obviously that's the wrong, but you know what I'm saying? And like, have a discussion with somebody who's going to, but this thing about your adversaries or, I don't know. It said something about adversaries. Now that I have my glasses on, I can't find it anymore, but being terrified by your adversaries. You can be scared of them. That's okay. Now, not letting them run your life if you're talking about like following the Roman Empire when they say to do certain things, but there are here's the rules. Every single piece doesn't always fall into place. It should, right? That would be great.
And I think Paul is talking less about fear here and more about unity. He's inviting the Philippians to band together, and together they will be stronger than any opposition.
Seeing together.
And I think there's something too about like having your conduct show what you believe, right? Like we can say all these things, but do you see a group of people helping each other, united, not fearing death, really knowing, having faith, caring about each other? If you see people acting that way, I think it's like little kids. They don't do what you say, they do what you model, right? And so I think there's part of this there too. Like, let's act the church like by your conduct.
Right.
And that will show people a lot of things that we can't say about with words. It's my part of my reading of it.
God, it sucks. There's people that are hungry. Oh no, I'm not dropping my food off at the food pantry. That's mine. Oh no, you're not touching my paycheck. That's mine. You know, like, gosh, that stinks. And
yeah. But it's really harder to walk the walk than it is to talk the talk. All the time. So
especially when it's so easy to just share a video.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
I was trying to that's one thing that I really got out of this last section was the unity, fighting together for the faith, which is the good news. And and we do that, when something horrible happens, like a tornado or anything like that, and people have lost their homes or lost, you see people come running, and several weeks afterwards they're there, but then all of a sudden they're gone because they don't have that time off anymore. They got to get back to their regular day jobs or whatever. And, and we just need to be still united with them and continue to help them, and it is hard. It's hard to do that all the time because we have lives, and I sit here sometimes sitting, and when we had the horrible weather. And I was just thinking, you know, I would love to go down to Aroma Park, which is just, 10 minutes away, and help people clean up, but I don't have that kind of energy,
Right.
and I don't have that ability to do, but you see a lot of people, and you see a lot of different churches going, they're all there, they're united, they're helping, and we need to do that all the time, not just when people are, because there's people suffering all the time. People need food, people need, it's just gotten so expensive to
Mhm.
live.
Yeah.
So anyway, I did a study on Philippians a number of years ago and through N.T. Wright.
Hmm.
And I was just looking at it, but it was basic, where does this, how do you feel when you're there, or how does it affect your life or whatever. And we didn't go into those types of questions, and we didn't really have time. So it's more like our discussions that we've been discussing have been good. So
Well, I'm glad, and